But the issue would come up again in the 190s AD between Polycrates, who was the disciple of Polycarp, and Victor, who was the bishop of Rome. Now, why does this have any impact on the Sabbath? Here's the key. From a stance of a once-a-year Sunday celebration, the Catholic Church eventually began to argue for a weekly Sunday celebration. But the admittance of a yearly Sunday celebration is what started the trend. You see how that works? Well, it's just one day a year. Start changing one day, right? It's just one day, right? But then they did that, and look where we're at now. Let's talk about the number 4 reason. The number 4 factor that influenced the Sabbath in early Christianity was anti-Semitism. This means hatred and disdain for the Jewish people. Sometime in the 2nd century, some Christian writers began to adopt a very anti-Semitic attitude, especially toward the Sabbath. Now, this could have been a reaction to Hadrian's war with the Jewish people. It could have been. But there were Roman writers before Hadrian who said very bad things about the Jewish people. Seneca, for instance, called the Jewish people a cursed race. Well, that's not exactly a kind thing to say, and it's not true. Let me read you a quote from one of these anti-Semitic writers. His name was Marcion. Marcion, about 144 AD, said, "Since that day is the rest of the God of the Jews, who made the world and rested the 7th day, we therefore fast on that day, that we may not do anything in compliance with the God of the Jews." Well, that's a pretty disgusting statement, isn't it? Why would he say this? Marcion was a Gnostic. The Gnostics viewed the material world as evil. And since the Sabbath is first and foremost a memorial of creation, it calls them therefore to hate the Sabbath as well, these Gnostic teachers. But I want you to notice, go back to that quote one more time. I want to show you guys something. Notice how he calls the God of the Jews a separate God than the God of the Christians. Have you guys ever heard that before? I actually know people who think that. Well, that's not a new argument. I hate to break it to them. That's a pretty old one. It goes back to Marcion. But I want you to notice that he taught people to fast on the Sabbath, to desecrate that day, because we don't want to do anything that makes the God of the Jews happy. Let's go to the next quote. Justin the Martyr, 150s AD. "For we too would observe the fleshly circumcision and the Sabbaths, and in short all the feasts, if we did not know for what reasons they were enjoined you, namely on account of your transgressions and the hardness of your hearts." Justin's talking to a Jewish man. Now, I can't find a single verse in the whole Bible that says he gave the Sabbath because of the hardness of their hearts. That doesn't make any sense. Totally illogical. Totally unscriptural. But you see, Justin did not like Jewish people. So, from his perspective, it's any argument that makes the Jewish people look bad and any practice the Jewish people have. And the Sabbath, of course, is a practice of the Jewish people. The early Christians who adopted anti-Semitism used this hatred of the Jewish people to attack the Sabbath. So eventually, if you were a Sabbath keeper, they would accuse you of Judaizing or trying to earn your salvation. Arguments that we hear today. And it was an attempt to diminish the importance of the Sabbath, to demean the Sabbath in a way that would make you influence your mind not to view it as that important. It became so strong in the 600s AD that Pope Gregory called Sabbath keepers Judaizers and preachers of the Antichrist. Now that doesn't make any sense, does it? But see, when you hate a group of people in your heart, you cannot logic. There is no reasoning that you can have. Preachers of Antichrist, let's say Christ kept the Sabbath, so how was it Antichrist to keep the Sabbath? It doesn't make any sense. The Antichrist who's coming is called the man of lawlessness, not the man of lawfulness. The Roman church later promoted forced fasting on the Sabbath to desecrate the day, just like Marcion did. It's funny, the Roman church declared Marcion a heretic, but then they adopted some of his principles. That's real interesting. Number 5 is syncretism. As I talked about earlier, syncretism is blending some of the Bible with aspects of other religions. The 3 most common belief systems that were syncretized with the Bible were Gnosticism, which I briefly mentioned earlier, sun worship, and Greek philosophy. Let's talk about Clement of Alexandria. By the way, Clement claimed to be a Gnostic, as if that was something you wanted to be. Here's what Clement said in his work Stromata. And he, that is God, gave the sun, the moon, and the stars to be worshipped. You guys find that in the Bible? Are we supposed to worship created things? No. But Clement apparently thought it was okay. He said some Christians in his times prayed toward the sun. Can you find that in the Bible? No. In fact, in Ezekiel chapter 8, we're told not to pray toward the sunrise like the worshipers of Tammuz did. He also said that God gave the Greeks philosophy to guide them in righteousness. Well, that's not in the Bible either, is it? Here's what Tertullian said about 200 AD. Others, with a greater show of reason, take us for worshipers of the sun. Now, I want you guys to realize something. Never before in Christian history had Christians been accused of being sun worshipers. Not one time before this. Do you ever see the Apostle Paul having to defend himself against the accusation of sun worship? No, it's not in the Bible. But Christians at this time had to defend themselves. Well, no, we don't worship the sun. Now, here's what he says, though. This suspicion took its rise from hence because it was observed that Christians prayed with their faces towards the east or towards the sun. But if we, like them, that is the heathens, celebrate Sunday as a festival and a day of rejoicing, it is for a reason vastly distant from that of worshiping the sun. So he also confesses that there were pagans of that day who worshiped on Sunday. It's also the first reference to that in history. He goes on to say this in another work. For the Jewish feasts on the Sabbath and the purification, and Jewish also are the ceremonies of the lamps, all of which institutions and practices are of course foreign from your pagan gods. This quote, I want you to hold that quote up there for a minute. This quote is very important because Tertullian admits that the Sabbath it does not belong to a foreign god. Yet he's keeping a day that does belong to a foreign god. Isn't that kind of weird that he can't see the logical contradiction in his own reasoning? But I also want you to see this. Notice how he calls the Sabbath Jewish. You guys see that? Does the Bible ever call the Sabbath Jewish? Nope. Not one time. The Sabbath of the Lord your God. The Sabbath was given for who? Man. Mark chapter 2. But you see, by attaching that word Jewish to the Sabbath and then demeaning Jewish people, they try to dissuade people away from it. Let's keep going. In the 300s, 400s, and 500s AD, Roman church writers continued to compare Christ to the sun, to light, and to day. This caused serious problems, and I'm going to bring up some of this in just a moment. Augustine, for instance, he rebuked people who lived in his day. Now, Augustine lived in the late 300s, early 400s AD. He had to rebuke people who thought Christ was the literal sun. So they worshiped the sun because they thought Christ was the sun. Guys, I want you to realize, can't you see how a little leaven is a whole lump? Well, we're just going to pray toward the sun. And then, well, Christ is the sun. And then before you know it, people are worshiping the sun. Well, leaven's a whole lump. Let's keep reading. Pope Leo I, 440 to 461 AD, he said that there were Christians who bowed down to the sun on the steps of the Church of Rome just before going to services on December 25th. Now, how Christian is that? To bow down? He says it. It's right there. I give you the reference. Hey, you want to read it? I've got it in another book I wrote. If you want to see the quotes, if you don't believe me, that's fine. You want to see the evidence? I'm that kind of person. That's okay. I'll give it to you. He talks about Christians who got on the steps and physically bowed down to the sun and then turned around and went to church. But that was okay for him. That was okay. He thought that was hey. He gets upset about it, but he doesn't do anything about it. Syncretism. Let's go to the next. Eusebius of Alexandria, who lived in the next century, also testifies there were Christians who worship the sun. Here's what I want you guys to realize. The Roman Church developed an entire calendar based upon the sun. It's not just Sunday. Sunday was just the start. How many of you guys know what December 25th is on the calendar for most people? You guys have heard of that, right? You want to know where it came from? I'll tell you where it came from. The ancient Romans called December 25th Bruma, or the day of the new sun. And the sun was said to have been born on that day. And at this time period, we're reading, if you could go back, please, thank you. We're reading about Eusebius of Alexandria. Go back one more. And Pope Leo, we're reading about these guys, and they're struggling with all this sun worship on December 25th. Well, the Romans considered that to be the day of the new sun. So at this time in the Roman Catholic Church history, they began to call Jesus the new sun and say he was born on December 25th. To my knowledge, the Roman culture is the only culture that honored December 25th. Because they thought that was the solstice. Guess what? It's not the solstice, but that was the day they honored as the solstice. Let's go back right there. Let's leave right there. How about March 25th? That's the day that the Romans considered to be the spring equinox. Guess what, though? It was also the day of the Magna Mater, or in Latin, the great mother of the gods worship. And this was the day that the Roman Church picked to be the Annunciation of the Virgin Mary when she was conceived with Christ. And they just happened to pick the day of the great mother of the gods, that the mother goddess was worshipped. How about June 24th? This was considered the summer solstice to the ancient Romans, because that is the day in which, again, this is, even though it's not the astronomical solstice, this is the day that the Romans recognized the solstice on. They considered that to be the day in which the sun shone the longest day. Okay? The Roman Catholic Church comes along and says, you know what? Because light begins to decrease from that day until December 25th, that should be the, please go back. That should be the birthday of John the Baptist. Because John the Baptist said, I must decrease that he may increase. What kind of convoluted reasoning can you come up with? But they developed, you got to understand, it's a whole calendar based on the sun. You can say that Christians of this time became sunburned. I'm just saying. Let's go to number 6. Allegorizing of Scripture. This was an attempt to diminish the Sabbath by using faulty reasoning and numerology. I almost put illogical reasoning, but I'm not really sure that that's, I can say that. But anyways, you'll see when I go through it. Let's talk about Justin the Martyr. You notice I keep referencing the same people over and over again, Justin the Martyr. Here's what he said as it relates to the Sabbath. For righteous Noah, along with the other mortals at the deluge, being 8 in number, were a symbol of the 8th day, wherein Christ appeared when he rose from the dead, forever the first in power. Now wait a minute. I don't know about you guys, the Bible don't talk about an 8-day week. You guys ever seen that in the Bible? Now Romans had an 8-day week, by the way. But I want you to notice where he's taking a number, he takes the number 8, and he allegorizes it about the day of the week in which Christ would raise from the dead. Well, the Bible never says Jesus resurrected on an 8th day of anything. You can see this is all allegory, just making up stuff. Some of the stuff they said, here's another one. We'll go to another quote. The Lord our God does not take pleasure in such observances. If there is any perjured person or a thief among you, let him cease to be so. If any adulterer, let him repent. Then he has kept the sweet and true Sabbaths of God. Hold this slide for just a moment. I want you guys to realize he's trying to allegorize the Sabbath. He's trying to say, look, if you keep the other commandments, you've really already kept the Sabbath. That makes absolutely no sense. It's a way to try to explain it away, though, right? Well, if I keep the Sabbath, that doesn't mean, keeping one commandment can't take the place of keeping the others. This is all allegory. Here's another one. It's not in the slides. I'll just tell you, though. Clement of Alexandria. The same names keep coming up, right? Origen said that staying away from sin was always keeping the Lord's Day. Okay, can't find that in the Bible. We should always stay away from sin, but if we're not keeping the Sabbath, we're not staying away from sin. Contradictions. You see, just illogical. Let me give you another one that they used. Some of these allegorical writers would take circumcision, which happened on which day? 8th day. And then they would say that was a foreshadowing of Christ circumcising the Sabbath to give us the first day of the week. How illogical. How do you even... There's not an 8-day week in the Bible. There isn't an 8th day. Now, the number 8 was very important to Gnostics, though, and that's where that comes from. I'm not preaching on that today, though. Let's go to number 7. So number 7. Last but not least, the bishops of Rome, we call them popes today, okay, guys? But they weren't called that originally. They were just called bishops of Rome. They started to get kind of cozy with the Roman emperors in about 300 and some AD. And emperors would codify church practices as Roman law. So if you read Revelation 17 and you see the whore or the harlot, and then you see the beast, this is what's going on between the Roman church and the Roman government at that time. It's kind of like, let's go to the next slide. This explains it a little more. This started with Constantine. He made the Roman church an institution of the state, and then the Roman church would support the emperor. It's kind of like, hey, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. Let's talk about Constantine for just a moment. We're going to talk about Constantine. Constantine did not change the Sabbath. I'll say that a second time. Constantine did not change the Sabbath, okay? Think about it for a minute. Nobody can change the Sabbath, guys. Right? So put any name there and the sentence is wrong. Okay? But Constantine didn't even Constantine protected Sabbath observance. It's going to be in the next Sabbath Sentinel. He protected, it's online, so you can go on SabbathSentinel.org. We now have an online blog. Got an article on this. It's going around the internet. It's got, probably hundreds and hundreds of views now. But some of the laws passed during his reign indirectly affected the Sabbath. And they laid the foundation for Sunday laws that tried to attach biblical meaning. Watch this, hang in there. Constantine ruled that people could leave property to the Catholic Church when they died. Well, who do you think is going to get a lot more influence? The Catholic Church is. Because they're going to get more property. When they get more property, they get more say-so. By the 600s, the Roman Catholic Church was one of the biggest landowners in the whole Mediterranean world. He also passed the first Sunday rest laws. But here's the key. They did not ban Sabbath, number one. But number two, there's no biblical meaning attached to them. He dedicated Sunday to the sun. That's where we get the name Sunday from. Let's go to the next slide. 326, there we go. He passed the law and granted the Roman Church special privileges, and all other groups were not allowed these privileges. And they were bound to public service. What does that mean? How many of you have ever done jury duty before? Anybody ever done jury duty? Yeah, they call our house when I was younger, and they asked for Kelly McDonald. I think they were looking for me. I'm a junior, by the way. And I think they wanted me, but they got my dad. My dad went to jury duty, I think, for me on accident. But anyways, that's the kind of public service this is talking about. If you were Catholic, man, you can get out of that. But if you weren't, you had to do it. He also regulated the number of clergy in Christianity. So he told the Catholic Church how many bishops they could have and how many deacons they could have. And so the intertwining, though, became more firm. The intertwining between the Roman church and the Roman government became more firm in the time of Theodosius. In 380 AD, he tried, I should have put the word tried, he tried to force everybody to become Roman Catholic. And everybody else was a heretic. And this paved the way for Sunday laws. I've got a law up here. If you go to the next slide, I'm going to quote to you, this is out of a book of law called the Codex Theodosianus. Okay? And sometimes I bring it with me, but it's a book about that thick of laws from this time period. I'm going to read to you the law where Theodosius tried to make everybody Catholic. Here it is. To the residents of Constantinople, it is our will that all the peoples whom the government of our clemency rules shall follow that religion which a pious belief from Peter to the present declares the Holy Peter delivered to the Romans. In which it is evident the Pontiff Damascus and Peter, Bishop of Alexandria, a man of apostolic sanctity, follows. Stop right there. I got to say something right here. You see that word pontiff, right? Does everybody see that? That's talking about the Bishop of Rome, who we call the Pope. I want you to understand something very important. This is the first law I have been able to find where the Pope was called pontiff. Now, what does that word mean? If you go back to ancient Rome, I'm talking 700 BC, 700 years before Jesus, the Romans established a college of priests called pontiffs. The head pontiff was called the Pontifex Maximus, and their job was to control the pagan religion of Rome. So listen, now the emperors had this title up until Theodosius. So when the Roman emperor calls the Pope Pontifex Maximus or Pontiff, he's saying he's over the pagan religion of Rome. Did y'all get that? And now we wonder why the Roman Church took all those pagan days from the Roman Empire and made them their own. Because that's what the title Pontifex Maximus actually means. And Peter, Bishop of Alexandria. See, notice Rome and Alexandria, they just keep coming up. That is, according to the apostolic discipline and evangelical doctrine, we believe in the deity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit of equal majesty and the Holy Trinity. Now look, I don't believe in the Trinity, y'all don't believe in the Trinity, but I want you to understand that Theodosius in that time